My name is Gal Bahar. I'm a PhD student in the Technion Israel Institute of Technology. I'm going to introduce you to a paper called Social Learning and the Innkeeper's Challenge, a paper of Rann, Smorodinsky, Moshe, Tennenholtz, and mine. Our story starts in a small village in France with one old restaurant called S for Safe Farm, with a known and constant quality of food, which is B, between 0 to 1. There is also a hotel in the village, and the hotel has a concierge that can recommend the coming guest which restaurant to go. In this case, there is only one restaurant, so we'll recommend them to go to restaurant S. And the hotel guest can also communicate with each other. So each time an hotel guest, a new guest is coming, he can communicate with his immediate predecessor. His predecessor is telling him that he went to restaurant S yesterday, and it's a great restaurant. Then he's going to the concierge, tell him which restaurant shall I go, and he tell him also, go to restaurant S, it's great, and so on and so forth. And our story could end right here with they live happily ever after, but oh no, one day a new restaurant is coming to town, and this restaurant is more complicated. We call it R for risky arm, and it has two possible quality distribution. With probability Q, it's distributed H, and with probability 1 minus Q, it is distributed L. And the distribution stayed the same for the entire game. And for each agent, it may change IID, which means that if it is distributed H, then each agent with probability PH will get quality of food 1 or quality of food 0 elsewhere. We also assume that QPH plus 1 minus QPL is greater than B, because if not so, then all the agents will go to restaurant S. And we assume that B is greater than PL, because if not so, then all the agents will go to restaurant R. So and because of this, then PL is less than B, less than PH. So if R is distributed H, then it will be better to go to R, and if R is distributed L, it will be better to go to S. Okay, so optimally, if we had a dictator siege, it will enforce enough exploration of restaurant R until we'll be able to know if R is distributed H or L. And we have a lemma that if we take K samples where K is large enough, then we'll be able to determine if R is distributed H or L. And we prove it according to Chebyshev inequality. And then you can exploit according to the samples of R. Okay, but since France is not a dictator, then we cannot enforce agents to do what we like them to do. We shall convince them that it's in their best interest to do so. So how can we enforce enough agents to explore and know that the agent can also talk to each other, to the previous one about the action, and both about the action and the reward. So how can we convince them to explore anyway? Okay, we continue with the model. We have N, a finite set of agents, which is large plus the mediator, which is the concierge. The set of actions, A, is S for the safe arm and R for the risky arm. Agents arrive sequentially in a random order, and each agent knows in which block you arrived. The block size is V. I will tell you later what is the size of V. The mediator observes all the past arms and rewards of all the agents that came so far, and whenever an agent is coming, he is recommending him one of the two arms. Okay, an agent that is coming choose an arm and receive a stochastic reward. Both of them observed by both the arm and the reward is observed both by the mediator and by his immediate successor, which means whenever an agent is coming, he can see his previous immediate predecessor, both action and reward, and he's getting a recommendation from the mediator, and according to that, he can decide which restaurant shall he take. Okay, we continue with some definitions. A mediator is incentive compatible, I see, if for each agent to follow the recommendation of the mechanism is in its best interest, which means that if the mechanism is recommending restaurant R, then according to the agent's knowledge so far, it will be at least as good as to go to restaurant R as to go to restaurant S. And the mediator is asymptotically optimal if for any arrival order, whenever all agents accept the recommendation of the mediator, then the proportion of all the agents that take the ex post optimal action approaches to 1 as the number of agents increases, which means that if R is distributed H, then almost all the agents will go to restaurant R, and if R is distributed L, then almost all the agents will go to restaurant S. Okay, some of the related works. This line of work was started by Kramer, Mansour, and Perry in 2014. They assume there is no communication at all between agents. And they offer a mechanism which was incentive compatible and which was the optimal mechanism among all the possible incentive compatible mechanisms. It was later expanded by many other works. Some of them are Fraser, Kemp, and Chen in 2018 that deal with heterogeneous agents. Another is Imolika, Mao, Slivkins, and Wu, which deal with constraint mechanism. And there are Mansour, Slivkins, Sigekanis 2015, and Mansour, Slivkins, Sigekanis at Wu 2016, which deal with regret minimization and many more. It was extended to social networks by Smorodinsky, Tennenholtz, and B in 2016, which they assume that agents can communicate according to a social graph, but assume that they communicate only about the arms, but not about the rewards. And they had a mechanism which was incentive compatible and asymptotically optimal for a very large variety of social graphs. Okay, so this work that assume communication both about the actions and the reward, it's a natural follow-up to that of Kramer, Mansour, and Perry 2014, which assume no communication, and to Smorodinsky, Tennenholtz, and B 2016 that assume communication only about actions. But if we add the communication about the reward, both the schemes of the previous works fails immediately. And since the agents have more knowledge now because they know also the reward, so the mediator has less degrees of freedom. Okay, so the algorithm that we offer to solve the problem is made of 4 main phases. The first phase is the no intervention phase. In this phase, the mechanism do absolutely nothing. It just recommends each agent to do whatever this agent would do in the case of an absence of a mechanism. And this phase is finite. And when it's finished, it must finish in one of 2 possibilities. First, that not enough agents went to restaurant R, and in this case, the mechanism cannot be decisive about the quality of food of restaurant R. And the other possibility is that there were a sufficient exploration, enough agents went to R. In this case, the mechanism can be decisive whether R is distributed H or R is distributed L. Okay, note that both in this case and in this case, the mechanism could already exploit, because in this case, it can exploit R, in this case, it can exploit S. But if he will do so, then in the case he's not decisive, he will not be able to explore. Therefore, we have a lemma that there exists a specific delta between 0 to 1, that if with probability 1 minus delta, in the case R is distributed H, we will exploit, and with probability delta, we will explore. And in the case R is distributed L, we'll explore anyway with probability 1, even though we can exploit. And in case of non-decisive, we'll also explore. So if we'll use this delta, then it will make an hypothetical agent, one who cannot see his predecessor, be indifferent between the 2 restaurants in expectation, which means that the other restaurant in expectation will look exactly the same as restaurant S, but we still have the problem that he can see his immediate predecessor, and therefore the explore phase will not be as easy as we would like. The explore phase will look like this. We let QR be the probability that R is distributed H, according to the mediator's knowledge, which means that according to the sample the mediator had so far, what is the probability that R distributed H. And we define PSR of QR, which is the probability to switch from S to R, to be 1 minus PL with probability QR and 1 minus PH elsewhere. And the explore phase will look like this. First, before we start the explore phase, we calculate QR, and we calculate it once more each time we switch from R to S. And inside the explore phase, each time an agent observes his immediate predecessor went to restaurant R and had a good meal there, he will be recommended by the mediator to go to restaurant R once again. And if he sees immediate predecessor went to R and had a bad meal, then he will be recommended by the mediator to go to switch from R to S. If he sees immediate predecessor went to restaurant S, then with probability 1 minus PSR of QR, he'll be recommended to go to S once again. And with probability PSR of QR, he'll be recommended to go to switch from S to R. Okay, and after exactly two case switches occur, we'll continue to the exploit phase. Okay, two case switches, it means we have exactly case switches from R to S and case switches from S to R. Okay, why do we need exactly two case switches? First of all, if we have two case switches, it means we have case switches from S to R. After each such a switch, we have a sample of R, which means that we'll have at least case samples of R, and we'll be able to calculate if R is distributed H or L and to exploit. But note that we'll have these case samples, we might have them a lot earlier than after two case switches, because first of all, we have some of the samples in the pre-intervention stage. And second, we have this loop here, so each time we reach to R, we might have more than one sample. But we still wait for two case switches, because if we will not do so, then in case R is distributed H, we might reach the case samples a lot earlier than if R is distributed L, and the agents might learn from it because of the explore state will take less time. The agents will learn from it that about the state of world of R, and they might not do what we like them to do. So we guarantee exactly two case switches, and we also, I'll not prove it, but the period time of the switching from R to S and from S to R back will be exactly the same in all cases of distribution and R, and it's not dependent on QR. It's non-dependent QR. I might show you later if I have time. Okay, and we have a lemma that all the foreign and transition in the explore part are incentive compatible, which means that if an agent is going to see his immediate predecessor went to restaurant R and had a good meal there, then according to his knowledge, going to restaurant R will be at least as good as going to restaurant S, and the same for all the other suite transitions. Okay. So as a result, we get that for every given setting of parameters, and for any V greater or equal 1 divided in 1 minus PH plus 1 divided in 1 minus PL, which this is the period time of two switches from R to S and from S to R, there exists N prime and delta between 0 to 1, such that for every number of agents N greater or equal N prime, the concierge mediator will be both asymptotically optimal and incentive compatible. Which means that for every agent will be in his best interest to follow the recommendation of the mechanism, and almost all the agents will go to the optimal actions. If R distributed H, almost all of them will go to R, and if R distributed L, almost all of them will go to S. Okay, the concierge problem also fits note that the concierge problem also fits the evolution of technology setup, where S is for the old technology and R for a new one. So when we have a new technology, it might look promise and that we shall adapt it, but only after enough agents explore it, we know if it's indeed an improvement and we shall adapt it, or we shall stay with the old technology S. And some possible future research in this paper, we assume that the agent can communicate only with one immediate predecessor, What if we let them communicate with the D immediate predecessor, where D is constant? And what if we let them to communicate according to a social graph? And also, what if we assume that the distribution of R is a continuous distribution? Okay, if I have enough time, I want to tell you about the period time. Just a minute. How much time I have? Oh, great. I thought I'll have a board here, but I don't have. The period expected time will be try to show it here, will be from here to here. QR is the probability that R is distributed H. If R is distributed H, then with probability, we'll switch from R to S. With probability QR, the switch will take 1 divided in to 1 minus PH, because now that if it's distributed H, then with we see R with bad meal with probability 1 minus PH. So the time that will take will be 1 divided in 1 minus PH. It's okay, everybody understand? And if it's distributed L, it will take an expected time of 1 divided in 1 minus PL. So the time, the expected time from R to S will be QR, multiple 1 divided in 1 minus PH, plus 1 minus QR, 1 divided in 1 minus PL. And the time from S to R will be the opposite time, because if it's QR is distributed, because if QR is with probability QR, it will be 1 minus PL, 1 divided in 1 minus PL, because of this how we define the PSR, and with probability 1 minus QR, it will be 1 divided in 1 minus PL. So if we add the expected time of this and the expected time of this, we get that QR is not doesn't have a role here. So we get 1 divided in 1 minus PH plus 1 divided in 1 minus PL, and it's not dependent in QR, and that's why we get the result here. Okay. So thank you very much, and if anyone have a question, you are more than welcome to ask the concierge.